Reed Davis, Dress Your Health for Success, subtitled Functional and Holistic Approach to Health, Episode 92, Alternative Health Tools Podcast.
I'm your host, Lisa Victoria, for Alternative Health Tools, where together we discover and share alternative health tools and resources for alternative health practitioners and experts. I'm joined here today with the wonderful Reed Davis, who's a holistic health practitioner, a certified nutritional therapist, and also the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. So excited to be doing this episode today, and a massive welcome to Reed, and thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a real pleasure. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. We're talking about functional and holistic approach to health today, which for me is really exciting. I've been on a bit of a journey myself, but I can't wait to hear what you've got to tell us all about today. So would you like to give us a bit of a background to yourself, please, Reed?
Sure. Well, I got into the holistic health field about 20 some years ago. I was actually in environmental law. I was cleaning up the planet, air, birds, water, trees, bees, and what have you. And I started to wonder, if the environment was so harsh on these poor things, then what's it doing to people, including me? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I began. It was just on, like you just mentioned, a personal journey. And I went right to work for a clinic, a wellness center in Southern California. It was a very busy clinic, and they gave me the job of running the place. But I went to a nutrition course with the owner, who was a chiropractor, and she said I could go as her assistant through her diplomat program. And in between classes, she let me work on her patients, let me talk to the patients and discover what kind of things we could do nutritionally. And I just fell in love with the clinical side. So I kind of got out of just running the business into working one-on-one, face-to-face with Mrs. Smith and Mr. Jones. And it was just amazing, the discoveries and the things that I went through for the next 10 years before I started teaching, which is what I do now.
Wow. And what was your kind of biggest kind of light bulb moment during that time?
Well, it happened very early on, and it was that I more or less triage. So everyone who came in the office talked to me first. We had chiropractic and acupuncture. We had osteopath. We had various modalities and things. And it was doing the nutrition. And just about every single person said that they'd already been to 4, 8, 10, 12 practitioners and had still had all or most of their original complaints. In other words, they were just being handed off from one practitioner to the next, what I call caught in a cycle of trial and error. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a big ripoff, frankly. Just how can that be? And I didn't know much at the time, but I thought, I will be the last person you need to see. That was at least my goal or desire at the time. So it was really that people are caught in this cycle of trial and error, and no one was getting to the root or the bottom of what were the real issues were. They were selling a lot of goods, products. They were doing a lot of modalities and things, and people were always hopeful, but never really getting where they wanted to be.
And I like what you said there, stuck in a cycle of trial and error, and that was exactly me. So I can really kind of resonate with that. And I think it's amazing that you had that goal that you were going to be the last person that they saw. So in terms of the types of people who you see and how this approach can work with people, what types of health complaints do you get coming to you? And can we just kind of touch on?
Sure. Well, nowadays, the system that I ended up creating after 10 years, and basically my claim to fame is that I ran more lab tests than anybody else. There were offices using the same labs that I used who had 5 doctors working there, and they would ask me, how do you get so much business? Are you really doing all this work by yourself? And yes, I just was unique in the way that I would gather new patients for the clinic, and it gave me an opportunity to run and get run more labs than anyone else, get more experience than anyone else. And that gave me a chance to make some observations and create a system of investigation. And then obviously the protocols, the holistic lifestyle-based protocols. And because I'm not a physician, I was a clinician, but an unlicensed one. And to answer your question, it was anybody walking in the door. Now, most of them were women, I'd say over 40 to 60 range. They were independent working women with health complaints, and they cared. They showed a lot of motivation to be willing to do the things that we asked them to do. I asked them to run lab work and let me look at underlying causes and conditions. They're willing to invest. And then over the years, they end up bringing you their children, their spouses.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you're working on everybody. But yeah, that was a great, I'll call it a demographic. At the time, there were women who were having hormonal issues and bone density problems, and then it just kind of snowballed and grew from there.
Interesting. So when they came in to see you, was there kind of like, obviously you say about hormonal issues, but were they experiencing different symptoms, and how did you then do the lab testing to identify what was the root cause?
Well, one of the most common things was they did have complaints, tired, fatigue. They had sinuses, allergies, moodiness, irritability, digestive problems, aches and pains, just all over it. And most had been to a physician. And interestingly, they'd been told, well, your blood work looks normal. I don't see anything really wrong with you yet. Like something might be a little high or a little low, but come back when you have something I can diagnose and treat. And, most of that would be through medication, more or less what we call now treating the paper and not the person. So that was the general person, coming in. They had all these complaints and you name it, but have been told almost nothing's wrong with you. Or, again, they've been in that cycle. Because if you get told by your physician nothing's wrong, what do? Well, you go on the internet, you start searching. Back then, there wasn't as much of an internet, or you go down the street to what worked for your neighbor, and that didn't work for you. So then you go down somewhere else, and it could be anything from, again, the modalities to different diets, different supplements, different therapies and such. So they really were caught in that cycle, and I didn't have a therapy to sell, so I had to really figured out what was wrong with them.
And I bet they loved you forevermore once you actually figured out and found a solution for them and treated the cause rather than, I guess, the symptoms, hey?
Yeah, physicians they do great work. They certainly are good at relieving symptoms. They've been responding to a marketplace over the last 100 plus years that all they wanted to do was relieve the symptoms. Working men and women of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s in the last century didn't exercise. There were no gyms. There wasn't health food. There was just work and food, like whatever you could afford on your plate. And so if they got sick or a symptom of some sort, they wanted the fastest way out of it. And physicians were there to fill the bill, they and along with the companies that produce their products that they use, were right there. And nowadays, though, it's a completely different ballgame. People are willing. They do want to know, well, what's really wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so physicians have been a little slow to respond, but they're catching up. But, it's been the health coach and the alternative kind of practitioner who's like where I started 20 years ago with, well, why don't I help you find out what's really wrong? I have amazing stories over the years of people who, responded very, very well to that kind of approach.
Yeah. I'm picking up on something you said there. It was kind of making me smile because it took me right back to my childhood. And my grandfather was very much of when he got to the age of 50, that's it now. We need to sit in the armchair and rest because we're getting old and we can't exercise. We've just got to, sit and rest and take things easy and eat food. And, he was quite a large man towards the end. Well, he certainly had a lot of visceral fat. And, he was quite poorly towards the end of his life. But really interesting, isn't it? The generation now, we are searching for answers, aren't we? Rather than just saying, oh, well, we're getting old.
Was fascinating. I went to a doctor once and was having a sore knee, and he told me, well, you're getting older. And I said, well, then how come it's just one knee? They're both the same age. And, he thought I was being funny, but I wasn't. I just said, well,
It
how
was
can it be my
a
age?
serious question.
Just
Yeah.
one knee. Yeah. But, over the years, we've just seen absolute, almost miraculous, complete recoveries when the person was previously diagnosed. So you might have somebody who was told they had fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or irritable bowel, or you can go on and on with these kinds of things, and yet there's it's people don't want to take just medication for the symptoms. They want to go through. They're willing to invest in the lab work, find out what's really wrong, and then use the lifestyle, the diet, the proper rest, exercise, reducing stress, and of course supplementation to fix it if they can, or get as close as they can to that.
You just described me, Reed. That was me 16 years ago. and John knows my story, but I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome when I was 22. And I was at university, and the doctor just said to me, here's some antidepressants, you're going to end up in a wheelchair. And it wasn't okay for me. So exactly as you've described, I went on my kind of journey, and I looked to how I could change, my diet, my stress, how I could take some supplements, and I actually found a really good health practitioner. So yeah, it's amazing when you've experienced that and that there's support out there to help.
Well, that's bringing a lot of people into our industry, if you will, or our profession. I consider myself a professional health coach now, and I teach a course in functional lab work and the natural protocols. And so this profession, this industry, if you will, is really helping tens of thousands of people who are willing to do the work.
Awesome. And just thinking about, the functional and the holistic approach. So for people who aren't quite sure why it's different, should we just touch on that and go through the approach as to why it's different to the mainstream approach?
Sure. Well, the mainstream is still mostly involved in symptoms, symptom removal. And we started there, there's nothing wrong with that. No one wants to be in pain, or if there's something about the way you want to, the way you look or the way you feel that you want to change, there's always a shortcut if you just want to take the shortcut. Physicians take on all comers. They don't really care much about the variables. They're not really looking into the variables. So, how old a person is, how much exercise they get, what kind of a diet they have, what kind of stressors are in their life, what environment are they living in or growing up in, and these kinds of things. Where those are exactly the things that a health coach, a professional health coach, does focus on. It is the variables that matter. So back to the physician, where the variables don't matter, they use an agent. So they're taking on all comers, and they are just adding something to that person's world or environment or body, if you want. It's some agent, some drug or some chemical or something like that. They're just adding something on, and maybe it makes the symptoms go away or mitigates them to a reasonable extent. We want to find out why they're having the symptom, have them modify their behavior. And again, I've come up with this formula, DRESS, spells dress for health success. It's diet. I mean, you could do a corrective diet. There's rest. And, it goes without saying, sleep is incredibly important. People aren't getting enough quality sleep at the right time. Exercise is just, again, goes without saying, you must. Sitting is the new smoking, they say, because it's so bad for you to not exercise. And then there's stress reduction and supplements, DRESS. And supplements, I don't have my own line, but I know a lot about them. And under stress reduction, it's so ubiquitous. It comes in so many forms. Sometimes we don't even know how much stress we're under. Yeah. That's why some of our lab work can indicate, hey, there's something that's very stressful. And they go, well, yeah, my boss is kind of a jerk. My spouse and I haven't been getting along, and my kids are misbehaving. But other than that, I'm fine. And so we're not always talking about mental, emotional stress, though. There's physical aches and pains from old injuries that haven't healed, and just lots of things could be going on with your body. Weak, weak posture and repetitive motion and these things if you're stuck in some job. So there's all of the mental, emotional, there's all of those physical trauma, bodily things. And then, of course, I think the biggest area is environmental stress and interior, biochemistry, just chemical and biochemical stress. And that is, again, everywhere and hard to avoid. And your body's going to respond to each one of those things with a stress response, whether you know it or not, whether you're aware of it or not. It's going to create imbalances in your body that will show up sometimes so far downstream. It's amazing how you can't really connect the types of stress you're under with that symptom, just because of the way the body works and because of how unique we all are.
It's fascinating, really, isn't it? How clever our bodies are and how they can respond when we start treating them with the respect that they deserve, I guess. And I always say to my clients, because I'm a holistic health coach as well, and I always say to my clients, you wouldn't put petrol in a diesel car in the UK here. So, why are you putting bad thoughts, bad food, poor sleep, poor exercise, etc., into your into your body and into your world? And we often certainly in the UK, we're running around at 90 miles an hour and not actually looking after ourselves. We're too busy doing other things.
We're very busy, and I can't say I'm less busy than anyone else. Matter of fact, I still work harder than I'll say most people that I know, and it adds up, and you do need to balance it out. And so I try to live my talk, walk the talk, they say. So I get up in the morning early, but I may go right to work, but I'll take my break at the appropriate time, go outside. I have a lot of property. I'm on a beautiful lake. I get to go out and work my hobby is gardening. So I do a lot of work on the property, growing things and getting lots of fresh air and sunshine, especially in Southern California, and the exercise. I have my own gym here and things. So you try to walk the talk. And that's probably one of the few. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Reed, carry on.
Well, that's probably one of the few prerequisites to being a professional in this area of health coaching and being a professional do-gooder. You've got to walk your talk, and only temporarily will I go for periods without, if I'm working on a special project, I might slack off a little bit, but you get right back on it.
So talking about, walking the walk, what talk we talk, we walk the walk. And you've just said, you're a very busy man, you're very hardworking, but you still find time for yourself. So can we give some examples as to how you fit that into the day? Because I know it's probably easy for people to think, well, that's okay for you, that's your job, and of course you can fit that in, but you're still a very busy man. So how do you fit those things into your day? How do you fit those into your lifestyle?
Well, it depends what it is, but I have a live-in companion who does some of the cooking. We take turns. Food preparation is really important because you have to eat right. I mean, that's a good place to start right there. Just start learning to find time to prep for food. I told you I start very early in the morning, but that lets me quit a little earlier in the day, where I can take something out of the fridge and get it to room temperature, and then I can go outside and work in my garden. I really do a lot of. I'm really a good hobbyist in that area, and so that lets me move around. I'm trimming shrubbery and getting that kind of exercise, and then come back and prep food. So diet is really critical, and you can find the time if you are a good shopper and you know what you should be eating. It's actually fun, and you make delicious food. As far as rest, I go to bed early. I was just brought up in that generation of early to bed, early to rise. And so I still, sometimes I'll go to bed at 8:30, usually it's not much later than 9:00. And on the occasion that it is later, well, I guess I won't get up quite so early the next morning, hopefully, and get that rest. And with exercise, again, I have a a guest house with a garage below, and I've turned that garage into a lovely little gym. So I'm able to go out there. I live out in the country, so I'm not near a gym. Otherwise, when I did live in the city, I went to a gym. I had a gym around the corner, and I would go there 3 times a week minimum and work out really hard. So you just do these things.
And just as you've described, there's always a way, isn't there? There's always an option, whether you live next to a gym or you don't. There's always, a way to exercise, or a way to, eat healthily, or get your rest and your renewal. And it's just taking that step back, I guess, and having that consciousness to think, I can do this, I can make time for myself, and it's got to be a priority.
I think it starts with that state of mind and the being positive, for one thing, which begins for me with being very grateful. I feel as much as I've had some stress lately with some things in business. Some of our suppliers have kind of upset the apple cart way beyond our control, but still it makes you, bounce around and zig and zag a little bit. And you just have to be really grateful and just for what you have, and know that you can continue to do really good work. If you get enjoyment from helping other people and seeing them be successful, then I think that's a good place to start.
And I love what you've just said there about practicing gratitude almost, isn't it? Because even in times of stress, there's always something to be grateful for. And a lot of people have a lot of stress in their lives, but they've also probably got a lot that they can be grateful for. So that's a really good top tip, really, isn't it? For anyone who's going through a stressful time out there.
It really is. Recently, one of our suppliers just pulled out on us. They just folded up shop. And it was, it's like, not only do I use them every day, but so do all my students, so do all my graduates in it. And everyone immediately looked to me. And so the question was, how's this going to affect us? I said, it's going to make us better because we're now we've been kind of satisfied, happy, and with the way status quo is good. But now we get to find something even better, not some cheap substitute. And luckily I have, over all the years, a lot of relational capital. I know lots of people in the business that all want to be helpful too. They kind of pay you back. Pays to be nice to people.
Yeah, that's another good tip there, isn't it? Is be kind. Practice kindness and gratitude.
Yes, ma'am. I
try. So the great acronym DRESS, so diet, rest, exercise, reducing stress, and supplements. On top of that, what could somebody do to help their health? So would it be then taking that to the next level and maybe having some lab tests? Would that be?
Great suggestion. And there's so many labs you can run, and almost anyone can run labs these days. There's now quite a few called direct-to-consumer laboratories. So let anyone run a lab. Well, it doesn't mean that you know how to interpret it. And what I find that most of this newfound freedom is doing is getting people to buy a lot of supplements. They're actually being used to sell supplements. Here, run this lab. See, you need our product. And that's very sophisticated, and I don't know how many people it helps, but there's a better way, and that is to look at the labs. Don't diagnose anything like a medical doctor would, but look for the healing opportunity. What really is out of whack? You could take the hormones, for instance. A simple saliva test, now dried urine is also used, would give you your cortisol to DHEA ratio. Cortisol is your stress hormone, and it's a catabolic hormone that breaks your body down. DHEA, or as you say over there, DHEA, that is also made in the adrenal glands, same stress glands that produce the cortisol, but is a counter-regulatory to the cortisol. So if they're in balance, you have the balance between the catabolic and the anabolic. One breaks you down, one builds you up. There's always this natural balance. Cells do die, and they do turn into waste products and need to be eliminated, and they're replaced by new cells. So we have balances like that that can be measured. If you're too catabolic, if your cortisol is too high, if your cortisol dominant too high for too long, it's going to break you down. And that's how people show up, and they go, "Wow, in a way, you're showing me on paper why I feel so lousy." There's other imbalances that are really important within the hormones, but also within the immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy production, the nervous system. The autonomic balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. People who are and you can have an effect on those things. You can affect just with lifestyle and supplementation and stress avoidance those elements that need to be balanced when you know what you're looking for. So if you're using laboratory work to look for those kind of indicators, I think you're on the right track. If you're just looking to sell a supplement, then I think that's not the approach that I want to use.
So when you do your lab tests, what types of lab tests do you do?
Well, we do them all: saliva, blood, urine, stool. Stool testing is very important to look for pathogens and the microbiome and things. We use the hormones or the saliva testing mostly for hormones. There's the urine testing for metabolic processes and liver function and all kinds of things. So what I've come up with is it's not so much the labs and using those blood, saliva, urine, stool. It's what are you looking for? So I have another acronym for you. It's HIDDEN. Hidden stressors and contributors to metabolic chaos. It would be within the hormone, H, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and the nervous system. That, again, that autonomic balance. HIDDEN, the hidden stressors and contributors to metabolic chaos. And so if you just straighten those things out, you're going to be healthier. And if you're healthier, then if you're just going to be healthy, happy, and these kind of things. But if you had a medical condition, you still need to look at those things, because in a way you'd be working around the edges of that until it usually goes away. We've had people previously diagnosed with some cluster of symptoms given a label, and when they all disappear, where's your disease? Where's your diagnosis now? Well, it just doesn't exist anymore. You don't qualify for that label anymore.
And that quite often happens to people, doesn't it? They own that label, and then they get sicker and sicker because they just expect to get sicker and sicker. And that's where it's really sad, isn't it?
Well, it's actually got a name. It's called the nocebo effect. Everyone's heard of the placebo effect, which is that, you can take a sugar pill, and if you believe enough that it's going to work, your health does improve. It's weird, but it's true. Now, the nocebo effect works the opposite way. You're given a label, and it just, oh boy, now you've got your diagnosis. Now you've got an excuse for not eating right, for not exercising, and so on. And so the nocebo effect is just as effective as the placebo effect. And this is true with some of the new testing, like genes. Like, you could be told you have the gene for a certain condition, and you look at it as a foregone conclusion. When genes are not a foregone conclusion, they're just, a potential for a certain disease. It's actually epigenetics and how you live that will affect how that gene is expressed, turned off, turned on, or what have you.
Amazing. It's so fascinating, remarkable, isn't it? Yeah. And I was reading a book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he, talks about you are the placebo, and the mind is so powerful, isn't it? In terms of, if you believe something to be true, you'll make it true almost, and it translates through into your body.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's a great guy, and he's written some good things, but for thousands of years, the Hindis, for instance, have something called the kalpa vriksha, and that was the wishing tree. And when you stood under the wishing tree, whatever you thought of would come true. And so, in a sense, we are all a kalpa vriksha. You can manifest that which you can hold fast in your mind, and gets into your spirit, really, and then sometimes with a little hard work mixed in, it can come true for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about the lab testing, so I just want to touch back on the lab testing for a minute. So we do lots of different samples. Once you kind of understand what's going on with a person, what types of treatments would you do for them? What could they expect if they came to see you?
For which problem now? Was there a
For
particular
any of
condition?
them, what
Okay.
different types of treatments would you offer off the back of a diagnosis?
Sure. Well, the point is that we talked about physicians, and they might use a lab to diagnose a specific condition because their standard of care dictates that they have a diagnosis or they can't treat you. They have to label it. That's why so many people get sent off without a diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with you yet. And so if they can label, if they can say, well, you're diagnosed with this or that, then there's an agent used and they're treating that thing, whatever it is. Now that's practicing medicine, which I'm not licensed to do. I can use lab work, but I can't give a medical diagnosis. And I don't want to treat a specific thing because I know that thing might be very far downstream from the actual causes, which are far upstream. Yeah. So this might sound a bit weird and a bit of a tongue twister, but we don't treat anything specifically. We treat everything non-specifically. So, yeah. and non-specific treatment is a well-known construct in the medical world too. They know that people can go out and just have a good time and laugh, and that's a non-specific treatment for everything, for just feeling better, sense of well-being and what have you. So non-specific treatment is not an abstract thing. So, and if you make that your profession, don't treat anything specifically, treat everything non-specifically, then the things you do for quote unquote treatment will have an effect on every cell, tissue, organ, and system, the entire organism, every cell, tissue, organ, and system. So cells do not need to be taught what their job is. There is an innate and inherent wisdom, if you will, grand design or purpose. Cells know whether they're a brain cell or an adrenal cell or a skin cell or a muscle cell. They know it, and they know what to do. And so it's that intelligence that non-specific treatment depends upon. So you basically are creating a complete epigenetic program. In other words, a lifestyle program that works on a cell, tissue, organ, and system level. So, and the DRESS is that therapy or treatment, if you will. Now, each one of those things, people will have a weak area. They're like, yeah, I go to the gym, 3 to 5 times a week. I work out a lot. But then you find out they're not sleeping well, or they're not eating well, or they have some other stressor that they're just not dealing with at all. And they may be taking supplements, but not the right ones, and on and on. So we have a methodical approach to DRESS and a way of getting people from where they are up the steps towards, health and happiness. Now, the truth is, I don't know anyone at the top, who's reached the final step. I don't know anyone. We're all just kind of on that stairway or pathway or journey, as you called it. And, we can have those that we follow and those who we help up from who have more steps to go than we do. And so one of the first steps is to, in my book, run some labs, identify some healing opportunities, some of those hidden things that are out of balance, and then take the steps in your weakest area, whether it be diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplements. And again, most people don't even know half the stress that they're even under. Yeah. They just think it's normal.
Yeah. And it becomes part of their day-to-day life then, doesn't it? So like you say, they normalize it rather than take a step back and think, this isn't normal. This is crazy. I shouldn't be under this much pressure.
Yeah. If symptoms aren't normal, they're the result of some disease process or malfunction upstream somewhere. And it's almost impossible to predict where that upstream dysfunction really originated. So that's why we use the methodology of looking at some things that I mentioned, and then applying the general principles of health building, because those general principles of health building, properly applied, will outperform specific treatment. It outperforms specific treatment. That's, in other words, if you're going to someone and they're just working on one thing, I'm a specialist in the gut. I'm going to heal the gut. Well, I'm sure they're going to take a good stab at it, and they might actually have some results with some people. And certainly their heart's in the right place, and they want to do some help you improve. And they probably will recommend something above and beyond just supplements or medicine, something to do with lifestyle. But there's actually a more comprehensive way to do that, and it's the general principles versus specific treatment. Those principles are all within the DRESS program.
And the DRESS program, if someone's out there thinking, well, actually, can't I just do that anyway? Why do I need to go for a lab test? What's kind of the benefits of having a lab test compared to just following the DRESS model?
Mm-hmm. Well, the lab tests are just kind of a shortcut, Certainly that's a good point. That is actually the solution, but there's labs that would tell you, or at least some kind of assessment that would tell you, well, which one's right for you? What about your food sensitivities? Wouldn't you want to find out what those are? So you have to find it over a long period of time, waiting for symptoms to occur or go away, what's called, an elimination diet. So people do have sensitivities. And I can go through each one of the DRESS values and do this for you. So which diet? Yes, you could just go do DRESS, but and so which diet? Well, there are labs that would tell you what you're sensitive to. There's another assessment that would tell you the correct percentage of protein, fat, and carbs you probably should be eating. That has to do with your oxidative rate, how well you burn energy. You want that to be the right fuel mixture for you. So there is some assessments that will just shortcut the whole experimentation process for you. And under stress reduction, I think that's where the biggest concern is, because there's stressors that you don't even know you have. Chemicals and environmental stressors, even those food sensitivities, you're getting double your bang for your buck there, because that's a form of stress reduction, finding out what foods you're actually sensitive to. And so there's just, you could just go DRESS. And good luck.
Yeah. And then they'll be back to see you again, because they've kind of self-diagnosed.
They could find their way, depending on the problems they're trying to overcome.
So we talk about food sensitivities, which a lot of people are aware of. They might be dairy intolerant, or they might sound gluten intolerant. But you talk about environmental and chemical stressors. Should we just elaborate a little bit on that? Because many people out there might not be as familiar with those areas.
Well, you remember in my introduction, I was in environmental law. I studied the environment and the laws regarding protection of us and the planet. And it's just amazing the number of chemicals that have been dumped upon us. It's something like, I don't want to be quoted exactly just now, but there's about 50 barrels worth of chemicals being dumped into the environment, 50 barrels per person per day. There's that much chemical being dumped into the environment, whether it's through pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, insecticides, not to mention all the stuff used in industry, not to make our clothing and our furniture and our everything that you see that's man-made, not to mention what's in our food that ends up in our food. If you can read, if anything on the label has more than 2 or maybe 3 syllables, it's probably not good for you.
If you can't actually read it, then it's probably not good for you.
You can't pronounce it, you can't read it. It's got 5 or 6 syllables, then you know for certain that's not meant for human consumption, really. So I'm joking around, of course, but it's the truth. So environmental contaminants, pollution, chemicals per se are ubiquitous, and none of them really, or relatively very few, have been tested for safety. So out of the 80,000 plus chemicals in the environment, maybe a few hundred have had human trials for safety. And otherwise, we are living the human trial. We are the rats in the maze. And I've had physicians who study this better than I do say that we're basically marinating in a toxic soup. If you live in a modern city, and even where I live out in the country, I see the effects of pollution and things everywhere.
And I'm quite close to London here. Fortunately, I don't live in London because it's a brilliant place to go, but I can't wait to get out. I grew up on a farm, so for me, I'm fresh air all the way. But I do notice a difference when I go into London. There's a lot more pollution in the air. You've got a lot more traffic, and I just can't wait to get out because I just don't feel like I'm breathing fresh air.
Well, I agree with you. In a recent study on cadavers, young men in their 19, 20, 21-year-old range who were killed in car accidents in the city of Los Angeles were all tested for chemical, and they each one had 200 to 300 chemicals in their body to varying levels, but none of them good for you. All of them interfering with a metabolic process in some way, all of them contributing to poor health, illness, and mayhem, if you will. Metabolic mayhem.
It's a really interesting kind of subject, isn't it? Chemical and environmental toxins. And certainly when I, trained to be a holistic health coach, it kind of widened my knowledge thinking about these things, because before, you think about sleep, you think about exercise, you think about nutrition maybe, but you don't think about the air you're breathing or what you're putting on your skin, which is then going into your body. Even when you wash your hands, or you're doing the dishes, or you wash your face, you have a shower in the morning, we're coming into contact with chemicals all the time, potentially, aren't we?
Yes. Simple answer is just yes. It's, as we just said, they're ubiquitous, and you really have to kind of work at eliminating them or avoiding them as much as you can. That's another thing about testing. Yes, you could do okay without testing, but let's say we do a food sensitivity test and you eliminate a certain number of foods from your diet, and let's say you actually feel better. Well, what does it tell you? It tells you that you are subject to influences that you had no idea about. And you feel better when you eliminate those things, and it makes you a little more self-aware, and you start looking around for, well, hey, if I didn't know about food sensitivities, what else can I eliminate? What else can I eliminate? You go to your bathroom cabinets and you start throwing out personal care products that are full of chemicals, and then you feel even better. And then you go underneath your kitchen sink and you throw out household cleaning products that are toxic and actually poisonous and these kind of things. And there are naturally derived alternatives. Unfortunately, those usually cost a little bit more, and that's a problem that only through, if we all did it, then those products would become cheaper. So it's usually, that's usually the how the marketplace works. So if everyone threw out all that stuff, then those people who are making it would start making the good stuff. It's only because they sell it because they can. And so what I was getting at was, by running a test on one thing like foods, you start realizing that these things make a difference, and you can start looking around for other things to eliminate. Even toxic friends. People have friends who are just toxic things. It gets on to every level you want to talk about, eh?
Yeah, toxicity. Yeah. And what you just said there, it's so true for the UK in terms of buying products. You can walk into the local supermarket and you can buy a hand wash or a body wash for like equivalent of $1 or £1. And if you actually bought an organic one that didn't have as many chemicals in, it maybe cost you $10 or £10, and people say, I'm not paying that much. And it's like, well, how much do you value your health, and what are you putting on your skin every day?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I have actually trained quite a few people in the UK, and they take my course because it's available all over the world. I think we have 50 countries people have taken the course in now.
Wow.
And it's different everywhere, but people are the same. So the products and the availability and the pricing, and there might be some regional motivating factors, such as the health insurance. Here in the United States, you pay for that. I pay every month a premium. I'm on Medicare because I'm over 65, but I pay in addition to that. First of all, they charge me more because I make more, and that's fair. But then I pay what they pay. But anyway, it's a bunch of rigmarole that you don't have to go through. So in order to keep your insurance rates down here, we have to be healthier. And we have also health savings accounts, which is a tax-free shelter for any money you spend on yourself. I can write off my gym membership, my massages, and
That's
just
amazing.
all my supplements and testing and things. Those are tax deductions. So now people where healthcare is quote unquote free, they might not be so motivated. It's like, well, I just go to the doctor when I get sick and I don't have to pay for it out of my pocket. Well, number one, you are paying for it, but or someone is, but it's doesn't lead to the healthiest lifestyle. So those are some other factors, I think.
And they're paying the price through their health. So that's an even bigger price, really,
Paying the
isn't
price.
it?
Yeah. That's so true. And most people are already spending it on something else. Here it's Starbucks. I mean, people spend $300 a month on Starbucks, because they're just addicted to good coffee. I admit it's, there's some great tasting stuff there that's very satisfying, but, $300 a month, that'll pay for a lot of, visits to a health coach, and for some supplements, and for a gym membership, and for all these kinds of things, paying a little bit extra for what have you.
And then that goes into a whole different realm of addictions and caffeine addictions and associations. I've got to have my coffee in the morning and I can't possibly go without it.
Yeah. I find it difficult myself, but you buy the best organic, now there's the mold free, and all these different things, and you can argue about how you make it, and you can argue about or discuss what do you put in it. Like, it's a good way to actually get, if you're doing like the bulletproof coffee, you're getting your medium chain triglycerides and your other good things for your brain fuel and what have you. Protein.
Fascinating world. So, Reid, just very quickly, what's your view on kind of adrenal fatigue? And so if someone's out there who isn't feeling great, would that be diagnosed through a lab test or anything like thyroid issues? I mean, obviously people here can go to the doctors and they can do thyroid tests, but what would be your view on that?
Well, we test the adrenal output on every person. And yet we don't call it adrenal fatigue. Number one, that's an obscure diagnosis. It's a great construct, though. So a construct is something that gives you a way of looking at things that works for you, and it could work for a group. So the construct adrenal fatigue is very useful. If your stress glands, if you just keep stressing them, what do you think is going to happen? But it doesn't quite work that way biochemically speaking, or biologically speaking, or physiologically speaking. They don't really get tired, but production can go down for various reasons. And so, again, it's not a legitimate medical diagnosis. There's such a thing as adrenal insufficiency, and of course there's autoimmune adrenal. There are some real adrenal, but the one that they call adrenal fatigue doesn't meet the requirements of a true medical diagnosis. But it's a great construct that you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And if you burn the candle at both ends, it's not going to be, and it can show up on lab work. It shows up as this cortisol to DHA imbalance. And then as you look at the circadian rhythm, your cortisol throughout the day, you can see, and it explains why you feel so crappy. And it's a high motivator for changing your behavior, so that you feel at least less crappy, if not really happy, you know.
I like that. Less crappy, if not happy. But no, and you know, sadly, in the UK, and certainly I see a lot of people. They are, you know, running around so busy, look so stressed. They don't look happy. They get sick, and then once they recover, they don't kind of take a step back and say, well, what can I do differently next time? They just kind of get back on that hamster wheel, so to speak, and off they go again until they get sick again. And a lot of people are very stressed.
Yeah, and it's true all over the world. I just have to tell you a really quick anecdote, because they talk about road rage, and you've heard about people on the highways in Los Angeles or New York, you know, and people like just taking shots at each other because we have guns, you know,
Yeah.
and we can really hurt someone, But so you hear about road rage, but I was in England. I was driving a rental car from Stonehenge. I've been visiting. I wanted to see those all my life. This is just a couple of years. My whole life, since I was 10, I wanted to see Stonehenge. And so I was finally there. I stayed at a nice bed and breakfast with my son. And then we left and came back to England. I mean, to London. We were headed to London. And the road, you know, in the United States, the slow lane is the right lane. If there's a 2 lanes and you're the slow guy, you go in the right lane. Apparently it's not like that over there. You know, so I'm in the right lane because I'm just going at average speed. And this guy comes around and he's driving like a maniac, and he passes and he gets in front, he slams on his brakes and he's giving us the finger and stuff like that. And I just backed off like, who's this? What's going on? My son wanted me to run into him so we could beat the guy up. But I'm only half kidding about that. And he did it again. And then he did it 3 times. This guy was so mad at me for driving slow in the right lane. And that's road rage, you know, and that's a dangerous thing. And I thought, oh, here's merry old England. And I'm just the Yankee visitor, you know, like just cruising along, going from Stonehenge back to London. And oh my goodness. Yeah. So you've got your road rage too.
We do. I think it's probably worldwide, but thank you for sharing that story. We're not all that bad, but I have witnessed it myself, and it just goes to show, doesn't it, you know, what stress can do to people, because in that moment they must be very stressed if they, you know, can't show compassion to another person. And you know, I drove in somewhere today and I parked in this spot, and this lady came out and went, "You can't park there. That's a designated parking spot for this building, and you're going into that building over there." And I thought, there's 5 empty spaces. Half of the spaces are empty. What's the world coming to if we can't even share parking spaces anymore? You know, if it's a problem later, call me and I'll move it. But no, I had to move it and park it somewhere else. And I just thought, this is crazy, you know, stress and rules over a parking space.
Yes, it gets pretty ridiculous sometimes.
Yeah. So another note there to take a look at our stressors in life, and that's part of the DRESS model, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we all need to take a deep breath. You know, and it's kind of where I go. It's like, you know, breathing. Recently, when that supplier of ours I told you about pulled out, I had to take a deep breath. I mean, this could really affect a lot of people that I feel very responsible for, and so I had to do some breathing, you know, and get that weight off my chest. I mean, I really felt like 100 pounds of black steel had just hit me, and you know, you turn it around. You know, they ask, well, how's this going to affect us? It's going to make us better. You got to be able to make lemonade out of lemons, as they say, and look for the silver lining, as they say, and it really works. I mean, that's really a good outlook on life to take.
And there's a great formula, isn't there? The event is only actually 10%, but the outcome can be affected by 90% of how you respond to that situation. What you're saying there in that situation, you just took a deep breath and chose your response rather than reacted, because like you say, because it could affect, you know, a lot of people that you feel responsible for. But it's really important, isn't it, to take that deep breath, take a step back and choose your response, because that's going to massively affect, you know, how you think, how you approach the situation, and then how you deal with it.
Yeah, you got to get into that mental state or emotional state, whatever you want to call it, of clarity. And I think sitting up straight and breathing. I mean, if I said to the listeners now, everyone sit up straight, please sit up straight, and you see a room full of bodies moving,
Just, yeah.
it really, it shouldn't be that way. You should
No.
already be sitting up straight. You should already, because that allows you to breathe properly and allows your organs to hang properly without a lot of pressure on them. And you just function so much better when you are sitting up straight. And breathing properly, you function better. It's part of stress reduction, the DRESS. Well, what's a huge one? How you sit and breathe.
And that's a really quick win, isn't it, for a lot of people? Because a lot of people now are quite sedentary. There might be office workers sat at a laptop, hunched over in meetings. And like you say, you're just compressing everything, aren't you? So great top tip there. Sit up straight and give your organs some space to do what they need to do.
Oh, we got a lot of top tips.
Yeah, we have, haven't we? So you talk about your courses you do. So we've given people lots of information about how, if they've got a health concern, how they can come and see you. But if someone's interested in taking this further and developing their own knowledge and training with you, you mentioned the courses that you run. Should we just touch on those quickly?
Yeah, sure. I teach something called functional diagnostic nutrition. And there's a functional diagnostic nutrition certification course. So FDN, as we call it, is very affectionately known by our entire community of practitioners. And I've trained over 2,500. I call them my deputies. We've deputized all these people to go do some good in the world by getting the training in the lab work and in the protocols, the DRESS program, and how to apply it on a person, how to interview, how to clinically correlate all the test results. We're not treating the paper, how to educate the person so that they can self-treat. And so that's a profession. That's a legitimate profession. And, but you don't have to, you could take the course just to work on yourself too and your family. And a lot of people do that as well. That alone probably is worth the price of admission, because we do have you work on yourself to learn the principles we're talking about. You're required, and it's paid for all in the tuition. It's paid for to run some labs on yourself and to do your self work. Because remember, walking the talk is critical. So, all of my deputies out there, they're walking the talk, or you just tell the principal and I'll get them straight.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because if they haven't been through the process, then how can they understand what their patients, clients are going through if they've not been through it themselves? Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
I've run hundreds of labs on myself, because lab companies want our business. They know that I have a couple thousand practitioners that I could influence, and they're always, what about this product? What about that product? They want me. This would be great for your people, And I said, well, send me a couple kits, or send me some of those products, if I'm interested, and I'll consider it. I vet everything, or actually we now have a whole committee and team that does it together. We have an R&D department, but that's how we do it. Yeah. There's no way you can weasel your way into our favor with any carrot, like it's just how we do things. We carefully vet things out, and we do it on ourselves first.
Yeah. Amazing. So it's been fantastic talking to you, Reid, and I think we could probably talk for hours. Is there just kind of a parting shot you want to leave with the listeners? Is there a kind of key message? We've given them top tips, but is there a key message we want to leave today?
It's been a wonderful show and opportunity to go over some of these principles. And I think when we touched on the state of mind, I think that's if I had one tip, like, Reid, what's your one sort of secret, if you will? I do think it's my point of view on the world. I see it as not just a cup half full versus half empty, but a cup running over, just really like full abundance, and you try to find joy in everything and stop and be in the moment. And so I know that when I'm not stopping to smell the roses, that I'm not very happy. But when even no matter how busy I am, I really find it in my garden. I go outside and I have all these little things. I buy my garden presents all the time. I bring things home.
That's amazing.
It could be from a junk shop or something I stole from the neighbor's house, or whatever it is.
I've never thought of it like that before, buying your garden presents, but I like that. That's nice.
So you got to stop and smell the roses. For sure.
But we're not advising our listeners to go out there and steal from the neighbour's garden. But
I'm just teasing.
Maybe borrow from the neighbour's garden and see if they notice, or see how long it takes them to notice, because they probably won't notice.
Right.
Oh, amazing. How do people get in touch with you, Reed, if they wanted to get in touch with you? What's the best way?
The best way is probably the website, which is functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com. I tried to think of a longer URL, but I came up with that. Functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, and you'll learn all about it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Reed. It's been a pleasure to have you on our show today. I'm Lisa Victoria, and I'm your host today for Alternative Health Tools. And if you like what you've heard from Reed today, please do tell your friends. And we can be found on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, on Spotify, and anywhere else you get your episodes from. So once again, a massive thank you to Reed for joining us today. Thoroughly enjoyed this show. And I wish you well in the future.
And same to you, Lisa. You keep up the fantastic work that you're doing.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.